Denmark, it's Copenhagen. Why the heck would I open this with a slide of Denmark? Because in 1999, Denmark legislated that horse wormers could only be supplied by prescription by vets to clients. Why? Because they figured the resistance of worms to normal anthelmintics, normal wormers, in the Danish horse population was so increasing at such a scary rate that if they didn't do something and everybody continued to worm their horses the way they were worming them, that within a few years there would be no effective wormers left anymore. Right? Now they're a fairly smart bunch of people and they took action in 1999 on this. Now that same problem is here, it's in the States, it's in Europe. We just haven't done a lot about it. The Danes were really proactive. So, you know, this is serious. Resistance of worms to the common products that we're using every day is serious. And that's why I want to go to this talk. So why are worms important? Well, you know, you can have everything from simple tail rubbing to death. The whole extreme. So you might have no clinical signs at all, even in a horse with a bad worm problem. So they're the two extremes of, you know, plus everything in between. Now, how do horses get worms? The first thing I want to point out is worms are species specific. So horse worms won't go to cattle or to sheep or to goats or to dogs or to humans or anything else like that. So, and this will be important in a little while. So basically the horse that, I've got a slide here. So you've got adult worms in the gut, they pass out on the feet, in the dung, on the pasture, the eggs hatch and the larvae develop, and then those larvae are eaten by the horse and then the whole cycle starts. Now, in this area here, there are some variations exactly as to how it gets from the dung back into the adult horse, and you can have pasture mites and all sorts of things. So that's it's a little bit different with each worm, but basically that's the cycle. Nice simple cycle. So these are the common worms that horses have. The small strongyles, these are the most important ones. I can never pronounce the words, I'm not even going to try. So these are the drugs that are effective, moxidectin or fenbendazole. Does anyone know what fenbendazole is? Commonly Panacur. Right. And you can, Panacur at 10 times the normal dose is safe, and you can actually use that for 5 days. If we've got a really resistant problem, we'll drench these guys with a 10 times dose of Panacur for a number of days. And in some cases, that's the only way to get rid of a really resistant problem. Okay. Large strongyles, the BZs. Now the BZs are one of the oldest drugs, or older drugs. They're not really very good anymore in most cases, and typically we're going to use the macrolytic lactones. Tapeworms, you can use praziquantel, okay, at a normal dose, or pyrantel at a double dose. And this is a trap for young players because a lot of the worms you'll buy will say pyrantel, but it's a normal dose, not at a double dose. And you think you're doing the tapeworms, and it doesn't do them. So this is where it gets really complex. Roundworms, very, very common in foals. Excuse me, I'll move, sorry. Very, very common in foals, and high cause of ill thrift, poor weight gain, and even death. What about the blood thing, rhodococcus? Is that, not rhodococcus, rattles? Is that transmitted by roundworms? No, it's not. Which one is that?
It's not a worm.
No, but one of the ones just has a high correlation. Okay, right. Threadworms and pinworms. So I've got this all summarised into the notes, so you don't have to try and remember this. And then lungworm, which aren't common unless you're running your horses with donkeys typically. Okay, like mine. And lastly, bots. So Anybody that's been around a while will remember Negivon as a bot paste or a bot trench. So, these are the classes of wormers. BZs, the common ones we have fenbendazole, panicurt, and oxandazole. The macrolytic lactones, so these are the ones that we most commonly use. These are all the ivermectins, abamectins, abamectins, all those sorts of things are all in that group. And then praziquantel and pyrantel. So we only have 3 groups of worms. And that's the problem. We only have 3, in effect, we've only got 3 cars to drive, 3 models of car that are going to do the job. And if you get resistance to one group, then you're down to 2. If you get resistance to 2 groups, you're down to 1. And if we go back to this lot, you'll see there's nothing here really that gets everything and gets it well. It's quite a complex area. There are a lot of worms, but only 3 things that will effectively treat them. And not all of them at that, because this group here is the only one that does tapeworm, remember? Those 2 don't do tapeworms. Again, I've just given you some examples. Panicurt is the active ingredient is fenbendazole. Strategy T has oxandazole and pyrantel. Equimec, macrolytic lactone, ivermectin. Equimax, again, a macrolytic lactone plus praziquantel for tapeworms. Equest plus tape, moxidectin and praziquantel. And ammo, abamectin and pyrantel. So, again, I've got this in notes for you. So, this is how complex it gets, and I'm not going to bore you with going into this in detail. But there's the worms down there, and they're what we can use, just go across the chart and you can find out what to use to kill them. This is just another chart, the same thing. Okay, let's get down to Tintax. What should you be using and how should you be doing it? So what do you think I'm saying? Big flow, yeah. So do you know, and I'll go through it. So really the only way you know whether your horses have got worms or not is by doing a fecal flow. And if you've got 10 horses on pasture, only 2 of them are going to have significant worm burdens, the other 8 aren't. If you're worming all 10, A, you're wasting money, and B, you're helping select for resistant worms. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail now. So, really, egg counts are not an expensive thing to do, and you can save yourself a lot of money by doing egg counts and not worming. And I'll give you some strategies for that now. But just some general rules. Obviously, we worm the mare 4 weeks prior to foaling and the day after foaling. And treadworms are really important in pregnant mares, so use something like a macrolytic lactone. Foal's really important. You want decent growth rates and all that sort of stuff. So worm them from 4 to 6 weeks of age. Check on the safety, because not all of them are safe, and read the fine print, because a lot of them are not safe in pregnant mares, not safe in foals. So just read the fine print. And then worm your foals every 4 to 8 weeks, until they're healing. Now, one of the things that was promoted a lot back through the 90s was rotating drenches. And most people, including most vets, got it wrong. They would rotate the drenches, so they'd use, say, a BZ today, and then in 8 weeks' time they'd use. So they actually won't use, that one this month, this one in 8 weeks' time, and then this one, and they rotate that whole cycle. All that does is actually select for resistant worms more quickly. So when I'm talking about rotating, stick to the same product for 12 months. If you like ammo, stick to ammo for 12 months. And then rotate to a different product group. So you might go to, you might use that for 12 months, and then you might go to, say, Strategy T, which is a totally different group, still has pyrantel in it, or you might go to Panicur. But don't rotate every worming. Don't change your drench or your, whatever you want to call it, every worming. Stick to the same one for 12 months and then rotate. These handouts will give you a way to go through and choose what wormers you're going to use, okay, and put that 12-month plan together. Or contact Judy and they will help you put it together. Now, there is a really interesting drug, Equest, oxydectin. They only need to worm every 3 or 4 months with Equest. It's a nice product. Now, if you're starting to get really smart about your worming, you'll start to worm based on egg counts, based on the type of wormer, and also based on the time of year. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about now. So you only, if you're using a boticide, something that kills bots, you only need to use it mid to late summer and mid to late winter. So you wouldn't use it in spring or summer. Okay, you don't need to do bots at that stage, just because it's transmitted by flies, and those flies aren't around. And a really other important thing to do with bots is, and so many people don't do it, is to remove the botfly eggs off the leg with the botfly knife or whatever your favourite method is. Because simply by doing that, you'll decrease the number of botflies that are around and decrease your need for worming. So a really simple management strategy like that. Tapeworms. You really only need to worm for tapeworms in autumn. If you're using a tapeworm wormer at any other time of the year aside from autumn, well, A, you're wasting money, B, you're selecting for resistance. There's no need to do it. But it does involve starting to think about what wormer I'm going to use, rather than walking into the feed store and saying, oh, they're on special, give me 10 of those. And that's the problem. Right? If you're driven by price like that, it's really asses up, excuse me, because you're doing yourself a disservice from all sorts of aspects, because the cheaper wormer may not be the right wormer. You may be better off using a more expensive wormer and not have to use it so often.
But sorry, Dick, you just said changing wormers annually.
Yeah.
Well, then this contradicts changing a wormer annually. Should you be changing the wormer season? You can't, like you just said...
No, you can put an annual plan in place and have the same 2 or 3 products for your 12 months, and then after 12 months swap to another 2 or 3 products.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, but some people use ammo now and then use Stronger P and then use Equest and then use something else.
Right.
That is not... You've got to have a plan in place. You can't just do this off the cuff.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. But staying on one wormer for 12 months isn't going to do this.
No, and probably I've been a little bit simplistic by saying one
Because it
word
should
for
be
12
seasonal.
months. Yeah, it should be a couple of things that you use. Yeah, and then after 12 months rotate to another couple.
Yeah, because you're just staying on the same...
Yeah, especially in a situation where you've got foreign horses, strange horses coming in, you've got a large number of horses and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you need to have a strategy in place so when they all walk on, they get wormed with XYZ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Tapeworms in autumn, and remember if you're going to use pyrantel, you've got a double dose. If you use praziquantel or praziquantel, it's fine. Autumn is another good time to treat for the infested small redworms with either oxydectin or 5-day course of fenbendazole. I think fenbendazole is very underrated. Not many people use it at all. It's one of my favourites, especially in horses with bad worm problems. And I've used it. We were using it back in 77, 78. We'll start tubing them with the sheep and the cattle Panicur. Brilliant results. Even we have horses that were resistant. We've done floats on the worm and other stuff resistant. Put them on 5 days of Panicur and works really well. I've also got this in the notes. This is, and I'm not promoting Virbac bleach, but they just have a nice worming chart. So everything that I've talked about is summarised in the Virbac worming chart. So they put it together, obviously using their products, but you can typically steal that or plagiarise it and use your favourite product, because they actually say in that what's in them and why they're using it. You go on the net and get that, or I've got it in the notes as well. Okay, so what is resistance? The development of populations of internal parasites that are not killed by the recommended doses of the drugs. And it's a genetic adaptation of the parasite. So what happens is if you, it's the same as antibiotics, like if we're getting treated with antibiotics, there's usually a bug that slips through the cracks, right, that doesn't get killed. Same here. If the horse has got, say, 1,000 worms, just to pick a number, and you worm it, you might kill 999, but there's one that's left. Selected resistance. And, you know, there's nothing you can do. You're losing goat's hand over fist, left, right, and centre. And they were dying. And there's nothing you can do, because there was no drug available to treat them. The same happened in the sheep industry to some degree, not as bad.
But now I think the sheep industry, they're actually breeding for sheep that are naturally resistant.
Correct.
Which, so I mean, it's the same with horses too. In a fact, you might have 10 horses in a paddock and only one.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
9 are resistant.
I've got that in here earlier. No, I've got that in here coming. But you're 100% correct, yeah. And just like some horses can be more resistant or less resistant, some worms are more resistant. So the problem is we've got 3 classes of wormers, and already the small strong voles worldwide are showing good resistance to BZs and pyrimidine, and the roundworms are showing macrolytic resistance to macrolytic lactones. This is already well documented worldwide. As I said, it's so much so that the Danes have now legislated in '99 that only vets can dispense wormers. So how do you detect it? So what happens is you would do a fecal egg count. You would then worm that horse, or that cow, or that sheep, or that pig, or whatever, and then a week or 2 later you do another fecal egg count, and you will not see a reduction in the fecal egg count. So that's the only way to diagnose it accurately. Okay. If the wormer was effective, you'd expect a 90% decrease in fecal egg counts. Now, the next 2 or 3 slides are going to summarise this. So if you want to sort of make notes or take an iPhone and pick your, like I said, it's in your notes. But if this is the stuff to take note of. This is what's important. So how do I prevent resistance? Use an effective product. This is a key one here. Most people underestimate their horse's weight. I've been to so many places where I've been told the horse is 300, 400, 500, 600 kilos. And it's actually 400, 500, 600, 700 kilos. And if you're worming it for a dose rate, if you're worming it for 500 and 600, you are doing a great job of selecting for resistant worms. If the horse spits some out and doesn't get the full dose, great way to help select for resistance worms.
What about the other way? If you've got a little pain, a whole tube.
The only side effect there might be killing the pony. But it's going to do a good job on the worm. And I'm serious. I mean, that's the downside is that you're going to kill the horse. But really, these things are such a wide safety margin. Like I said, Panacur, we're using it 10 times the recommended dose, 5 days in a row.
The only one that's not dangerous is iodine.
Yeah, I agree. Most of them I can't recommend you not stick to recommendations on pack or bottle, but my horses I always overdose. So, and make sure they don't spit it out. I'm not a great believer in the granules you put in the feed because, blow, gone. Drug rotation in working was recommended in the past. There's no beneficial effect. It actually increases the speed of resistance. Performing fecal egg counts is really important because 2 things. Which horse do I need to worm? And which parasites, on a fecal egg count, you can actually identify what worms your horse has got and therefore tailor the product you buy to more specifically suit that individual horse. Don't overdo it, don't worm every month, because again, you're helping select for resistance. So use the minimum number of treatments necessary. Some people that I've dealt with in the past, or some studs that I've dealt with in the past, we've managed to get our worming going twice a year. And you've got 50 horses, you know, you do a few fecal egg counts, you do some pasture rotations, you put some cattle, some sheep on the paddocks, and you can get your worming down for 50 horses down to twice a year. Do the maths on it. You're saving yourself thousands of dollars in pay. Now it's estimated, and this is exactly what Don was saying, it's estimated that 20% of horses in the herd shed 80% of the parasites, while the other 80% only have a small fraction of eggs. But you really only need to treat the horses that are shedding high heat numbers. Okay? Because that'll actually help you reduce resistance as well as keep your horses healthy. And if the horses are low fecal egg count, why not just skip the worming altogether?
So who do you do the fecal egg count through? You bet, or?
Yeah, we can do it for you. Do you know anywhere else that does it?
Yeah, there's a couple, look online, there's a couple of places, the government run one that you actually post
Yep.
worm tests, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Well, we were just talking that, you know, we could even do it on the farm with a
Yeah.
fecal socket and a staged microscope. So you could actually see what kind of eggs your horses have. And I can show you, okay, this is a fragile egg, this is an asteroid egg. And then we'll know, you know, what product to use.
I've had plenty of clients and some of the big studs I was working with up in Maitland that did their own fecal egg counts on a regular basis.
It's
Not hard to do.
It's not difficult at all, I can show you how to do it.
Nothing wrong with
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, he does
it.
that.
But microscopes, you know, microscopes out of China these days are, you know, a couple
Very
$100.
reasonable.
Now, pasture management, which is something that a lot of people overlook, which is what I want to talk about now, and also supplementing some other strategies. So this is, I think, the last slide. Remove manure from pastures every week. Pick the manure up.
Or harrow?
Harrowing is not as good as picking up, because picking up actually gets rid of it. Harrowing spreads it.
But, oh, sorry, I'll have to, you keep taking manure off the paddock, what do you put that in? You've got to replace the nutrient you take.
Sure, but you can replace it with cow manure or something like that. And put the cow manure on the horse paddock, horse manure on the cow paddock. You can also compost it. So the eggs are in the manure, and the fecal balls form a protective layer, like a cocoon, if you like, for the eggs to hatch. So when you harrow it, you break down the protective layers. You're exposing them to sunlight, water, air, all those sorts of things. So their survival rate plummets like crazy. So harrowing is great. Removing it entirely is the ultimate. But harrowing is better than leaving it intact. Ideally, you'd do it every week, but if you can only do it once a month, if that's practically, then you're better off being practical rather than idealistic and not achieving it. Yeah, do what you can do. Keep your stocking rates low. You know, you may not have control of stocking rates, but I'm just giving you the ideal case. Now, so we all have worms. Sorry. We all have worms. And a worm bird in a young animal, in a young horse, that horse picks up worms and develops two kinds of resistance. Number one, an age resistance. So just by getting older, that horse becomes resistant to worms, just like you do, just like your dog does and your cat does and everything else. That's an age-related resistance. Number two is an exposure-related resistance. So you get the worms, your body recognises it as foreign, mounts the defence mechanisms, and that horse then kicks that worm burden out. That's exposure. Now, the more you're exposed, the more that horse is exposed, the better those defence mechanisms are. They kick into play quicker, they can handle higher worm burdens and kick those worms out faster. Does that make sense? So if you put young horses on a very contaminated paddock and they pick up a stack of worms really quickly, then their system can get overwhelmed and they can conk out or get some other, ill thrift or whatever else that happens to be. Now you want to keep young horses on clean pastures. for clean earth pastures, where you can put your older horses on more contaminated pastures. And just on that point as well, a pregnant mare, because of the hormone changes, etc., will be less resistant to worms, more susceptible to worms, than a gelding or a stallion. Does that make sense? So you keep your young horses off contaminated pasture, and you keep your pregnant mares off contaminated pasture. Or don't worm 9 horses in a group and leave the 10th one alone, unless you've done a float that says that that horse doesn't have many worms. Now this is great. If you mix, if it's possible for you, run sheep or cattle, either in rotation with the horses, so you have the horses in that paddock, the sheep or the cattle in that paddock, and after 3 or 4 months you swap them over, or you can run the sheep and the cattle and the horses all together in one paddock. Because what will happen is, if the sheep eats the horse eggs on the blades of grass, or the larvae that are sitting on the blades of grass, those horse larvae will have a dead-end life cycle inside that sheep or that cow. They'll die. They won't continue their life cycle. Does that make sense? Right? And vice versa. When the horse eats the cow worms, then the cow worms die inside the horse. It's a dead-end life cycle. You remember, like I said right up front, worms are species specific.
So is that true of any species other than?
Yeah, yeah, well, goats on there. Yeah, alpacas, goats, whatever you want. Yeah. You want alpacas? Want to get rid of 4.
Excuse me.
Drench all the new horses before they enter the property, and then allow 48 hours before you introduce them into your normal herd. Because if they have got if you don't know what someone's been doing with their weaning program, and that horse that you've introduced to your lot has got resistance, then you're going to introduce resistance on your property. I'd even go one step further. I would do a fecal float on that horse the day he arrives, or she arrives, worm, and then do another fecal float 2 or 3 days later to make sure there's a significant reduction in egg numbers before I allow that horse onto my pasture. Because if that new horse has still got a lot of worms, I want to use something else to worm that horse before I brought it onto my property. Last slide. Again, I've got this in the notes. Again, you get these charts, and you can just go through what you need to use. It's all very easy. It's not easy, it's complex. But you can easily work it through if you just sit down and look at it for 10 or 15